I'd like to call this Board of Education meeting, Lancaster Central School District budget work session to order. In the unlikely event of an emergency, please note the exits. Please rise for the pledge to the flag and a moment of silent reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, Ms. Phillips, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So tonight we are presenting you your first look at the overall draft 22-23 budget. Over the course of the last work sessions we've already had this year, we've presented just about every section of the budget to you. Those were not forms, but they were where we were at that point. And tonight we will also look at revenue as a whole. As I said, and this is not a budget that you're approving tonight. It will be finalized and on your agenda to approve on April 17th, whatever that Tuesday is, 19th, the 19th, not Sunday, Tuesday the 19th. And hopefully at the end of tonight, we're at a place that we're presenting something similar to you for that meeting for approval. So typically at this meeting, the first thing we discuss is the state aid revenue budget. The state's budget deadline is April 1st. Despite expectations that there will be a finalized budget, on-time budget this year, there is not. So as of Friday, which would have been the deadline had passed, the budget was not passed, and I believe so in terms of the state budget, we are going to, at this time, budget for what we initially anticipated based on the governor's budget, and that is a hybrid of the governor's estimates and proposal, along with a couple of areas, transportation aid, building aid, that the district calculates itself, knowing better what we will likely actually receive compared to the governor's proposal. We feel pretty comfortable with that. It's been widely said across many organizations that the governor's proposal was really good. We even said that ourselves, and that a lot of the discussions aren't really going to be surrounding aid to education, like that's typically one of the big sticking points. So if there are any material differences from when the budget is finalized, hopefully between now and the April 19th board meeting, if there are any material differences, we will look to adjust the budget. So overall, our 22-23 draft expenditure budget that we're presenting to you tonight is a $122.3 million spending plan. That is a $4.4 million increase from this current school year's 21-22 budget, and budget to budget, that is a 3.73% increase. This budget includes most of the things that we've talked about over the past couple of months. It includes the staffing of an additional FTE speech therapist and laborer for the Buildings and Grounds Department. It accounts for inflation, rising supply costs that we're seeing across the board, basically double utility rates that we've been experiencing, not only for the district, but all personally, I'm sure. rising gasoline rates that we've also all been experiencing personally, and benefit costs. It does reflect some reductions in certain areas that we did previously discuss, as we just fine-tuned the budget, and also as some of our estimates, were solidified in some areas like utilities, our BOCES costs, and some of our benefit costs. This budget maintains all staffing and programs that we currently have in the district. So I'm going to show you the expenditure budget in a couple different ways. One is by budget area, and then the next will be by object. So this budget area is just kind of the overall category that our expenses are in: general support, instruction, transportation, and undistributed. For the general support section, that is 11% of our overall budget, and that it follows suit with our normal piece of the pie in previous budgets also. Our increase there, about $700,000, and those increases are attributed to contractual salary increases. This is where we're seeing the budget increase for our utilities for the district facilities, increases in BOCES expenditures, and also just normal annual service contract increases. The instructional portion, which is by far the largest portion, includes everything related to instruction for our students. That is 53% of the overall budget, and again, same size piece of the pie as normal. The $2.8 million increase is due to salaries, increases in BOCES services and costs of those services. Includes about $100,000 to maintain our Chromebook replacement plan. The cost of Chromebooks, just like a lot of other supplies and equipment that we're seeing, has increased dramatically compared to our previous purchases. And surprisingly enough, just day-to-day supply cost increases that we're seeing on our instructional supplies and for our different various departments, paper being one of them that the cost has nearly doubled, are all part of what this increase entails. The transportation section is 7% of our overall budget, still along the same lines of the same size piece of the pie as our regular previous year's budget. The $91,000 increase here incorporates some salary increases in our contractual transportation. That rate is able to be increased by the CPI, and as we know, the CPI is, I think, 4.81% on average for the last year. And it is, all of these costs are offset, not in full, but a big percentage on the revenue side with state aid for transportation. And then the undistributed section of the budget, which is 30%. This includes our debt service and our employee benefits. So just over $800,000 increase in this area. Those could be attributed to benefit cost rates, most of them which we don't have control over. Our debt has increased by $67,000, but that is offset on the revenue side by building aid that we're receiving on our capital projects. We also were able to increase the capital outlay project budget. It's typically $100,000, and that's the maximum according to the state. There is a proposal, both houses and in the governor's proposal, that proposed having that increase to $250 instead of $100. So that is not official, but we will know when the state budget is passed. That would be somewhere that we could tweak once we know what the final state budget is, but we have accounted for that. Doing a project, those projects are small, obviously $100,000. They are one trade, and you don't get to accomplish a lot of work based on all the work you have to do to plan it and submit it, and it has to be done within a year's period of time. So having that bumped up to 250 would allow us to do some more meaningful work. Right now, we do a lot of just light fixture replacements and things like that. So, and those, that work is aided just like a building project is aided. So. On the expenditure side, but just in a different way by object, so salaries, equipment, contractual. This budget, this slide shows the budget in that way, in that manner. So between salaries and benefits, that is 73% of the overall budget. That is $88.8 million of the $122.4 million budget. That 73% is standard for previous budgets for us, and also pretty standard across the state. In discussing with colleagues, everyone's typically between the 70 to 75% for salary and benefits as a percentage of their overall budget. About 50% of the overall budget-to-budget increase in 22-23 is related to contractual salary increases and the benefit increases. On the contractual side, Object Code 400, that's an increase of just over $800,000. That's where you'll see those increases related to our utilities and contract transportation. We also had a pretty large budget increase for tuition, which is for students who attend charter schools, students through the special education department who have placements outside of the school district. For BOCES, just about an $850,000 increase attributed to the remote learning program, not in full, but a large portion. That is something we did offer this year, but we did not budget for it because it didn't exist last year during the budget time. So it really just makes the budget reflective of the programs that have been offered. And then another large part of that increase placements and services that we contract with BOCES for. On the supply end, it's really those supply chain issues that we've been talking about, the rise of the costs across the board, and also a lot of bids that we participate in. We've found that vendors are not able to honor those prices or not able to honor those bid specifications. So they're not able to get the products that we're needing, and therefore substitute products obviously are coming in at different from what the bid contains. We are, while the food service department's budget is not part of this general fund budget, impact on our food service program this year. On the benefits end, we haven't really talked about those increases. The health insurance is self-funded, so we absorb all costs of health insurance. Benefits that people were expecting about a 10% increase on that end. And then our contribution rate, which is set by pension systems, the ERS rate is actually going down 16.2% to 11.6%. So we were able to reduce the budget for that line, but then the TRS rate is going from 9.8% to 10.29%, and that's a percentage of salaries that were three major coach our overall expenditure budget that we're asking voters to weigh in on. So the three major costs, revenue drivers for the district and for all districts would be the property tax levy, New York State aid to education, and then use of any reserve funds and appropriated surplus. So I will discuss the property tax revenue on the next slide, so I'll just kind of skim over that. Typically, in past years, about 49% of our revenue, and that's state. It's actually a little lower than in previous years of a piece of the pie, the revenue pie. The state aid to education is I didn't really go into depth because we did discuss it in January, but the governor's budget included a $2.07 billion increase to education. $1.6 billion of that increase is attributed to foundation aid. In last year's budget, state budget, they made efforts to fully fund the foundation aid formula. We're in year 17 of that formula. It was enacted right at the beginning of my career, and it's never been fully funded, including in year 1. If you added up everything that we haven't got according to the formula since 2007, that is over $135 million. I don't expect to ever get that back money, but what's important is that they're making efforts to become fully funded. So last year was our largest foundation aid increase ever since the formula was enacted, and this year beats that. We have historically been funded the last few years at about 75% of our formula. Some districts had 90%, some districts had 110%, a lot of the downstate districts that see that phenomenon. But we have been one of the lowest funded in terms of percentage across the state. So going into 22-23, our aid versus the formula was about $6.2 million less than the formula. And in the governor's budget, she is holding true with the budget last year of saying they're going to attempt to fully fund that within the next couple of years. So this year's state aid includes a $3.1 million increase in foundation aid. That would bring us to 90%. And then if this continues, we would receive the final additional $3.1 million next year. And then we would be at 100% funding after 23-24. So that's exciting to hear. The other large revenue item is our use of fund balance and reserves. In this budget, we're estimating to use $4.6 million from our reserve funds. That is a decrease over this current year. All of those reserve funds are attributed to specific expenses. So, a really easy example of why that amount is going down is that our ERS reserve fund is budgeted to be, it's budgeted for us to use an amount equal to what our expenditure is. And for 22-23, the ERS rate went down, so our budget went down. So we are using less reserve funds, but that is because our expenditures related to those reserve funds have decreased in at least one area. And then we are estimating to use an additional $200,000 of appropriated surplus, which would be funds from this year that have not been allocated to expenditures, so they're available to be carried over towards next year's budget in order to not have to increase the tax levy by that amount. Speaking of the tax levy, our estimate, we set this officially, we set the tax levy and the tax rate in August of every year, but our estimated tax levy for this budget is $59.3 million. Our maximum allowable amount was over $60 million, $60.2 million. So the estimated tax levy is lower than our our maximum levy calculation, the cap. We're estimated to increase our levy by 2.58%. The cap calculation would be an increase of 4.14%. And that is just over $900,000 lower than the levy that we would be able to present under the cap. So the remaining process from this point is just kind of waiting for that state budget to be finalized. And then we can compare our revenue estimates and look at whether we need to make any adjustments to our budget before we finalize the proposed budget. We will present the budget to the Board of Education on the 19th. And then shortly after that, we will present the budget to the community in terms of actual presentations, a slew of information that will be posted on the website and our budget newsletter. We'll have our annual budget hearing on May 9th, and then the annual budget vote and Board of Education trustee election will be on May 17th. The most creative slide, questions or comments?
So you probably know this is my favorite time of year. I love budget season. And I really wanted to highlight you, your team, the rest of the administration for really going out there and maximizing every dollar that we can. And, we really use BOCES really well to our advantage. Over the years, the funding, health insurance, things like that really go along in helping us keep expenses down. So I really appreciate, your team crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's, making sure that we get the most bang for our buck. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I think everyone's caught on with me that if they bring a proposal for something, a new service or something like that, that they do their research to find a BOCES that offers it, so it's BOCES-able. It's everyone's surefire way of it being approved, I think.
I love BOCES-able. Okay, so that concludes our budget work session. Our next meeting is April 19th, 2022. I'll remind you, that's a Tuesday at Lancaster High School at 7 p.m. Do I have a motion? Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Anyone against? Motion carries. Thank you all.